Instead of showing this hello blank fragment, we would, of course, like to actually show the list of Instagram posts that we get from our parse backend. We've done this a few times now throughout this class, so you should be feeling more comfortable with it. The first thing we'll do is go into fragment posts, and instead of having this text view inside of the frame layout, we are going to remove that and then just drag in a recycler view. Let's give it an ID of RV posts. RV stands for RecyclerView. Width and height are match parent. And then the other thing I'll do is just add a padding all around of 8 dp, just so it's not flush against the edges. Now going back into post fragment, we can get a reference to the recycler view. And the place that we find the reference to the recycler view is in the onViewCreated method. So I'll override that method. Say onViewCreated, and then RVPost will equal view.findViewById with the ID that we specified. And now we'll go through the normal steps of populating the recycler view. So I have the step-by-step instructions here that we can use to guide us. First, we'll create a layout for one row in the list in the recycler view. Then we'll create an adapter, which will be responsible for understanding how to take the data, which is one Instagram post, and binding it to a view. We'll create the data source, which is what we're going to get from the parse backend. We'll set the adapter on the recycler view, set a layout on the recycler view, and that should be enough to show it on the screen. One thing that's worth noting is that we have some of the pieces in place already for building out the recycler view, in particular creating the data source. So first off, what is the data that we're showing? We're showing a Instagram post, and we have a model already defined to describe that. We have a post class which extends the parse object, and the things that we will display will be description, image, and user corresponding to that post. The other thing is that in terms of getting the data, we've actually already played around with that too. If we open up compose fragment, we have a method here that we commented out called query posts. So what I'm going to do is copy this over, posts fragment. Let's add a tag. We'll actually be calling this method in order to take the posts we have and hand it over to the adapter. One more thing I want to call out that I did, which I recommend that you do as well, is going back into the parse dashboard. What I've done here is added in some fake data just to make our app more interesting. So in particular, what I've done is I added one more user called Baker, in addition to the two users we already had, Nathan and Rahul, and I associated a few posts for each user. For example, for my user, I uploaded this file of me looking like a hipster, and the baker has added in some photos around bread and cake and things like that. The basic idea here is just to bootstrap our application so we have something interesting to play with as we're building it out. Now that we have this fake data, let's take a look and make sure that we are still able to query it properly. I'm just going to add this method called query posts, and whenever we are creating this post fragment, now we should expect that this parse query should execute and we should print out details of the post. So if I run the app, the very first fragment that gets loaded is the home fragment. So we got rid of the starter text and now we have a recycler view which isn't showing anything. But if we go into logcat, then you can see now that we see the posts. And one other thing we can try is if I go into profile, some other tab, and then I come back, let's clear logcat, and now I come back into home, you again see the same post because the post fragment is being recreated, which means that we are going to again call this method query posts. Now we know that that's working. Let's go back and start the steps to use the recycler view. The first step is create a layout for one row in the recycler view. So I'm going to open up the project, and then we're going to create a new resource file in the layout directory. I'll call it item post. Since this isn't that interesting, I'm going to go ahead and fill this out and just talk you through it. So here's what I've come up with as a simple item post XML, which is representing one row in our recycler view. So you can see it's a vertical linear layout. There's a margin of 8 dp on all sides of the linear layout, just so that there's some spacing. Make sure you set the height of this linear layout to be wrap content so that it doesn't take up the whole screen height. the width can be match parent. Inside the linear layout, there are 3 elements. One is the username, and I set the text appearance of that to be large. And below that, there's an image view. I give it ID of IV image. I hard-coded the height to be 300 dp, and the width is the whole screen width. I set the scale type for the image view as center crop, which means that we should scale the image uniformly, maintaining the image aspect ratio so that both dimensions, width and height, will be equal to or larger than the corresponding dimension of the image view, which means basically that there will be no empty space inside the image view. And finally, we have a description at the bottom. I put in some sample text for the trying to look hipster picture. This is a margin bottom of 8 dp, just so that there's some vertical distance between each post. And I give this an ID of TV description. This is a good start to the item post XML. I'm sure you could make it look a lot better. But going back into post fragments, now we've done item 0. Item number 1 is creating the adapter. So what we'll do here is open up the project tab, and let's create a new Java file called posts adapter. And the superclass will be RecyclerView adapter. Before we parameterize the adapter by a view holder, first we should define a view holder. I'll define that here. I'll say class view holder extends the RecyclerView view holder. And then we need to add a constructor. And now that we've defined this view holder, we can parameterize it and reference it here. So now our adapter is parameterized by the view holder. Now we can let Android Studio help us to implement the methods that are required for every RecyclerView adapter. Similar to what we've done in the past, the way we're going to build the post adapter is have the constructor for it take in 2 parameters, one which is the context, so private context, and then another which is a list of post models. And then let's create a constructor which takes in both of these, and we can use these to fill out each of the methods that we have to override. So get item count is just the length of the posts, the size of that posts array list. And then on create view holder uses the layout inflator, which we're going to get from the context, and then inflate the layout file that we just defined, r.layout.itemPost. We pass in parent and false as other 2 parameters, and this will return to us a view. And then our job here is to wrap this view inside of a view holder. And then finally, we have onBind view holder. First thing we want is to get the post which is located at this position. So we'll say post.get at position. This returns to us a post. Now what we'd like to do is take the view holder passed in and bind the data of the post into that view holder. So I'm going to delegate that work into the view holder. So I'll say holder.bind, and I'll pass in the post. Android Studio will help us to create this method. Here, our job is to bind the data coming from this post into the view elements. In order to do that, we need access to the view elements that we defined inside of item post. So that's a text view, an image view, and one more text view. So let's get references to those inside of our view holder. So I'll have private text view, and the first one is called TV username. And then the third one is called TV description. And then there's a middle image view located in between those 2 text views. And we called that IV image. What we need to do in the constructor of the view holder is identify the views according to ID inside of the item view passed in. So for TV username, we gave that an ID of TV username inside of the item view. For IV image, it'll be IV image. And then for TV description, it'll similarly be TV description. So now these views are populated properly. All that's left to do now in the post adapter is to fill out the bind method to take the data from the post and actually bind it to the views that we've identified up here. So the easy one is the description. So we'll say TV description.setText, and we'll grab the description field or description attribute from the post. And the username is also pretty straightforward. So the username, the text is going to be the user of the post and then the username of that person. And finally, we need to load in an image in the IV image view. The way we'll do this is using a library called Glide, which makes fetching and downloading remote images really easy. So in order to use it, here's the Codepath guide for using Glide. So open that up, and then you can copy these 2 lines for dependencies in order to use Glide. I'll open up the build.gradle file in the app module, add these in, tap on sync now, and let's go back into post adapter. Once it's done syncing, and now we should be able to reference Glide in our code. So I'll say glide.with, pass in a context, and then we want to load in a particular URL, and the URL will be the URL of the image. This is an attribute on the parse file that we get back from getImage. And we want to load this into a target, and the target will be the image view. One thing we want to do here though is first check if the post has a valid image, because you'll remember that we did some dummy tests where we never included an image. So I'm going to save this as a variable, and then first check if the image is not null. Only then do we want to load it into the image view. This is now the full implementation of the post adapter, but you can see scrolling up to the top that this class post adapter is never used. So we're going to create an instance of this inside of posts fragment. So I'll say private post fragment is the adapter, and in onViewCreated we will now do step number 1, which is creating the adapter. So adapter is equal to new posts adapter, and we'll pass in context, which is getContext. And the second parameter here is a list of posts. So I will create a new member variable up here called private list post, and we'll call it all posts. And we'll pass that in for the second parameter. Before we pass it in though, we want to make sure that we initialize this to be a new empty list. Now we can continue on. So the data source we just created, which is all posts, and then set the adapter on the recycler view. So we'll say rvPost.setAdapter and pass in the adapter, and then we want to set a layout manager. And we'll pass in a new linear layout manager, which takes in a context. And by default, this will provide to the recycler view a vertical linear layout manager, which is what we want. Finally, when we get data back from this call to query posts, that's when we want to update our data source and then notify the adapter that we've gotten new data. So in query posts, when we come into the done method, right here we will say all posts dot add all, and then add in the newly fetched posts. Make sure there's no naming collision between the posts parameter here and the member variable all posts. That's a common mistake. And once we've added in the posts, now we can notify the adapter that the dataset has changed. Let's try it. So if we run the app, hopefully see data coming back from the query. So here you can see that we are seeing the username and the description, but the images aren't being loaded. And if you open up Logcat, we can see why. So there's an exception here, Java IO exception, clear text HTTP traffic to rahul-parstagram.herokuapp.com not permitted. So the issue here is that we are trying to make a request for the image. Glide is trying to make a request to the image on this line using an HTTP URL. That's what we're somehow getting back from parse, which is really unfortunate because ideally everything should be HTTPS. And as of these more recent Android versions, by default, clear text HTTP traffic won't be allowed. The easiest way to fix this is just to tell Android to ignore that security warning. And the way you can do that is by opening up Android Manifest. And in the application tag, add a attribute called clear text, uses clear text traffic, and set it to true. So basically the idea here is that we're instructing Android to say, we know that our app uses clear text traffic and we know it's insecure, but we would like to go ahead and continue using it. So now if you run the application, hopefully we should see images now. Awesome. And you can see that Nathan, we have his headshot, and there's one post that we had created a while ago which didn't have any image data. Here's the one that we had done from our emulator, and then you can see the dummy data that I've added in. The one quick thing I'll do just to clean up a little bit is inside of main activity, we're showing all these toasts every time. Those can get annoying, so I'm gonna go ahead and delete those. And then we can also get rid of the to-do for the home fragment or the post fragment. In the next video, we will do the final step of updating the profile fragment to only show posts by the signed in user.